Picture 1996. The SNES is taking a last glamorous bow. Square is busy polishing the meteor-sized hype rock called Final Fantasy VII, and Nintendo is boxing up its belongings for a polygon-flavored mansion on the hill, the N64, complete with 64-bit hot tub. Yet, in that exact twilight, an inexplicably sentient wedding cake named Bunt wobbles down a 16-bit aisle and hurls itself at Mario like fondant-coated wrath. Is this the fever dream where Bowser pays rent, you ask? Yes it is. Super Mario RPG is the game that hands you a plumber, a puppet gun, and a marshmallow cloud and whispers, "Trust the process." It's as if Shigeru Miyamoto and Hironobu Sakaguchi met in a smoky jazz bar, ordered one too many fire flowers, and challenged each other to a Mad Libs contest. Turn-based? Absolutely. Isometric? Why not? Boss fights against baked goods? Double down. We already know this should have collapsed under its own icing, and yet here we are decades later, still licking the spoon. So today, let's tear open the box, slice through 7 layers of nostalgia, and figure out why a glitch-free cart can feel so gloriously glitchy in your brain. Historical context, Square plus Nintendo equals, sure, let's drop a JRPG pipe on their heads. Let's set the stage. March 9th, 1996, Japan gets first crack at Super Mario RPG. 2 months later, on May 13th, North America dives in, blissfully unaware that Europe will be left staring at magazine scans until the Wii Virtual Console era in 2008, insert Tiny Violin PAL Region Edition. The collaboration itself felt like a crossover event nobody had the licensing budget for. Square, the studio that gave us Mode 7 world maps and life-altering existential crises, partners with Nintendo, the house that built platforming optimism. In the mid-90s, the hottest trend on store shelves wasn't even genre fusion, it was platform loyalty wars. Remember when you picked a side like you were declaring for a house in Game of Thrones, only with fewer beheadings and more blistered thumbs? I was working part-time at a local cabinet cave, an XP arcade pit stop wedged between a laundromat and a questionable pet shop. We had Daytona USA on one machine, Street Fighter Alpha on another, and a sticky communal soda that probably counted as armor. The arrival of Super Mario RPG in the backroom test station felt surreal. Here was Mario, that quarter-eating platform genius, suddenly spouting JRPG numbers bigger than the national debt. Kids who came in for light gun shooters would peek over my shoulder, see Mario politely queuing up Psychopath to read a Goomba's mind, and back away as though they'd witnessed tax fraud. I may or may not have taken bets on how fast the timed hit tutorial would break them. Spoiler, faster than a 1-1 warp whistle. Context mattered doubly because this was Square's swan song on the SNES. They'd already delivered Chrono Trigger's time-bending heartache the previous year, and inside company hallways everyone could hear the PlayStation siren call. Rumors floated of cancelled 64DD experiments, of Sonic and Mario arm wrestling in lawyer-filled boardrooms, of dev kits shipped in unmarked boxes. We'll never know how many prototypes were flashed onto EPROMs and then mercy wiped, location tests that never left the pachinko parlor if whispers are true. But we do know this. Square poured its farewell champagne straight into the cart's ROM and said, let's burn the rest of the budget on Mode 7 snowboarding, a Star Wars crawl parody, and the single sassiest Chancellor localization in Mushroom Kingdom history. Speaking of send-offs, Yoko Shimomura traded her Street Fighter II synth punches for pastel fanfares, weaving leitmotifs that can spin from regal to reggae faster than Booster drops Peach from a balcony. In a 2025 retrospective, she laughed. They showed me Bunt's sprite sheet and said, write something that makes frosting feel dangerous. I took that personally. Imagine your composer brief reading, make the player fear cake. That's 1996, folks, and it somehow works. Mechanics and why they pop, or how I learned to stop worrying and love the timed hit. Let me drop the biggest surprise first. This game still teaches better reflex discipline than half the 2020s indie boom. Fight me. I've got more iframes than a 3.5 ED&D monk. The timed hit system rewards pressing a button at the exact animation flash, which sounds pedestrian now, but in 96 felt like someone welded Mario and Luigi's future DNA onto a cartridge that should have politely retired next to Earthbound. 10 hours in, you've trained your thumb to fire Gino's finger shot with the precision of a speedrunner's start menu cancel, and when you miss by a frame, you swear you felt God's disappointment. Ask yourself, is losing 2 damage digits worth an existential crisis? Short answer, obviously. That kinetic layer sits on top of an isometric map where Mario still jumps. Nintendo refused to let him skip leg day. Dungeons become low-poly dioramas, tilted at 45 degrees like an eternal Dutch angle, where platforming still matters. Falling off narrow ledges mid-puzzle, that's Square reminding you gently that gravity is the universe's first turn-based mechanic. And the puzzles. One minute you're reading an acrostic poem to open a sunken ship vault, the next you're juggling barrels in Donkey Kong's old workplace like you're auditioning for a Rareware cameo. Let's talk party composition. Mario's mandatory, the unstoppable red staple, but then you recruit Mallow, the rain-summoning cloud with abandonment issues. Ever seen a fluffball weep literal weather patterns? That's as subtle as Eeyore specking into Stormcaller. Next comes Geno, a celestial puppet firing ballistics out of his fingertips. Imagine Pinocchio skipping the donkey detour and becoming Solid Snake. Bowser, hilariously dislodged from villainous real estate, tags along because his castle got repo hammered by Smithy's sword. He's that roommate who pays rent in resentment and Koopa claw scratches. And Peach, whose healing spells are so broken you could staple the B button down and still pass the DPS check. Every character move has comedic juice. Mallow's psychopath literally reads enemy thoughts. Did I leave the oven on? Bowser's Terrorize spins a Skull Cloud AoE, and Geno's Geno Whirl can one-shot certain bosses if you tickle 9,999 damage with a frame-perfect Y-tap. Admit it, you spent an evening trying to vaporize Xer, only to eat Sword Beam to the face. But the real mechanical highlight, the banana peel on Olympus, is Bunt, the possessed wedding cake. The fight progresses by extinguishing 5 candles, each representing its hit point milestones. Fail to keep slapping frosting and the candles reignite, prolonging your impending sugar crash. Defeat the top half and the bottom layer. Raspberry peels off for round 2. The result feels like Gordon Ramsay directed by David Lynch. Delicious, terrifying, strangely polite. The other marquee flex is the optional boss Culex, a deliberate sprite clash whose intro lifts Final Fantasy's crystal motif and plops it into Monstro Town like a cosplay troupe that blew past Anime Expo and refused to turn the van around. Culex plus his 4 crystals total 12,396 horsepower, a number that sits in your mid-90s save battery like a dare. He comes packaged with a Nobuo Light battle theme, complete with SNES fidelity timpani that rattles your grandmother's china. I remember arcade regulars begging me to beat him, then acting shocked when I leaned on Geno Boost like I was hot-wiring a NASCAR entry. Look, if Square gives me a speed buff that stacks with timed hits, I'm gonna exploit it harder than Wario exploits a buy low market. Mini rant time. Super Mario RPG's inventory limit is 29 items. That's right, 29, not the 20 I misremembered while foaming at the nostalgia mouth. Any JRPG where you can carry exactly 29 maple syrups is basically trolling completionists. Do I need all 6 firebombs? Yes, future me, because Bowyer's status arrows are cheaper than therapy. Can I ditch 2 pick-me-ups? Sure, if you enjoy masochism. The bag space calculus becomes the real endgame, a spreadsheet side quest that would make Marie Kondo's spirit quake. The platformer DNA also manifests through hidden blocks. One invisible chest in Monstro Town scolds you for cheating. Proto-achievement Snark, centuries before Xbox 360. Another chest, if snagged, equips you with an item whose sole purpose is sniffing out more invisible chests. That's like buying a treasure map that points to another map store. The loop is so self-aware it could run its own podcast. Legacy and influence, from timed hits to timeless hits. Ask around any dev conference in 2025 and you'll hear the same hushed confession. Yeah, we stole a bit of Geno for our combat prototype. Paper Mario's action commands, carbon copied timed hits, Mario and Luigi's bros attacks, ditto, only with bouncier physics and more shell-met humor. Ubisoft's Mario plus Rabbids turned Geno's finger gun swagger into literal blasters, and then hired both Grant Kirkhope and Yoko Shimomura to score the nod. The cross-pollination is blatant, beautiful, and still underappreciated whenever people shorthand the series as turn-based platformer. Yet the game sits oddly outside mainstream memory. Maybe it's because Geno resides in licensing limbo. Square owns him. Nintendo borrows visitation rights on Smash May costumes. Maybe because the Nintendo 64 pivot forced fans toward polygons, leaving isometric sprites to gather dust. Or maybe because Bunt is too delicious for the ESRB to handle. But ask speedrunners, who still glitch warp into Booster Tower's attic for sub-3 hour PBs, and they'll crown Super Mario RPG the spiritual missing link between 16-bit minimalism and the modern cinematic RPG. The 2023 Switch remake spiked a brand new wave of fandom, up-rezzing the diorama world while politely resisting Bloom addiction. Some dialogue lines were massaged for modern cadence, but the Axum Rangers parody, those Sentai goons painted Power Ranger colors, remains gloriously intact, complete with explosion posing that Michael Bay would invoice for. And for the record, rumors of a scrapped Street Fighter cameo were always fan telephone. Chun-Li does nap in Breath of Fire, not here. Likewise, any talk of a hidden Starlight puppet placeholder in Super Mario Odyssey lacks evidence and frankly underestimates how chaotic Nintendo's file names already are. Influence also shows up in the unusual tone of later Mario RPGs, the wholesome but weird humor, the willingness to let Bowser be a comedic brute rather than a mustache-twirling nihilist, the earnest belief that a plumber can duel a sword forged in an eldritch smithy and still have time to deliver a pun. When Thousand Year Door hands you a wrestling arena, or when Dream Team turns Luigi's REM cycle into a level hub, you're reaping seeds first planted in Rosetown and Moleville. And for trivia goblins, Monstro Town hosts a Link cameo, fast asleep, presumably mid-side quest, and a Samus cameo stretching her Zero-Suit legs in a guest room. The remake lovingly retouched their sprites without filing down their Easter egg edges. My favorite esoterica, though, is the unused dev string Jiminy discovered during a 2014 ROM disassembly, likely a placeholder for Geno's Star Spirit before they ran the legal cross-check. That's the kind of behind-the-scenes footnote that makes archivists weep joyful tears into anti-static bags. Closing paragraph plus score dash, the final slice. So here we are at the bottom of the bowl, scraping up residual frosting with the backside of a SNES cartridge. Does Super Mario RPG Legend of the Seven Stars hold up in 2025 on an OLED Switch, a battered CRT, or an immortal Twitch highlight reel? Absolutely, like a vintage arcade PCB that refuses to corrode, probably powered on the tears of every kid who never nailed Geno Whirl. It remains weird, confident, stitched together like a cosplay quilt, and crucially, fun. Sure, its isometric shadows occasionally gaslight your jumps. Was that depth or death? And the 29-item bag can feel like packing for a cross-country trip in a lunchbox, but those quirks are the chocolate chips in the cookie. You bite in, you crunch, you grin. Final verdict, I'm giving it 9.3 out of 10 Bunt-approved carbs, deducting 0.7 for every time the game tricked me into leaping toward fake perspective stairs, but adding an honorary plus 0.5 for that Yoko Shimomura overworld riff that still lives rent-free in my cortex. Would I recommend? Absolutely. Would I trade my last pick me up for a Geno amiibo? Don't ask rhetorical questions you already know the answer to. Oh wait, that's my line.